We know more about the surface of Mars than we do about our own ocean floor. Over 80% of it is completely unmapped and unexplored. Today I'm breaking down the most terrifying ocean cryptids ever reported, starting with one that has video evidence: Chessie. The Chesapeake Bay is one of the most heavily trafficked waterways in North America, zero places for a giant sea serpent to hide. And yet, between 1978 and 1982, dozens of people swore they saw exactly that. Witnesses described a serpentine creature, roughly 25 to 40 feet long, with a humped back gliding through the water. But the real bombshell came on May 31st, 1982, when Robert and Karen Frew spotted the creature from their waterfront home and grabbed a video camera. The footage shows something dark, elongated, and very much alive. Marine biologists at the Smithsonian reviewed it, and the best they came up with was inconclusive, which is, not exactly a denial. Skeptics say it was probably a large sturgeon or a floating log, a 40-foot floating log that multiple witnesses watched move independently through the water in broad daylight. Sure, then, after the early 1980s, the sightings just stopped. No explanation, nothing. Chessie is one of the best documented cryptids in North America, and virtually nobody outside Maryland has ever heard of it, but at least Chessie had the decency to stay in the water. The next one washed up on a beach, and what people found still doesn't have a real explanation. The Trunco. In October 1924, off the coast of Margate, South Africa, beachgoers reported seeing something that sounds like it was written by a 10-year-old with a very active imagination. A 45 to 50 foot creature with a massive trunk-like appendage, just absolutely brawling with two whales for 3 hours. That's longer than most movies. And after this alleged cage match with actual whales, the creature reportedly washed ashore, where it sat for about 10 days. A massive, white, furry-looking carcass with a trunk hanging out on the sand like it owned the place. Then it washed back out to sea, gone. Here's the part that genuinely frustrates me. 10 full days on a public beach, and nobody conducted a single scientific examination. Nobody grabbed a sample. Nobody thought, hey, maybe we should study the impossible trunk monster before the ocean takes it back. It just floated away. Cool. Zero scientific verification. No proper photographs, no specimens collected. Marine biologists think it was probably a decomposing whale with bloated tissue creating the illusion of a trunk, which honestly makes a lot of sense. But cryptid communities love this one because it has something most ocean cryptids don't: a specific date, a specific location, and witnesses who stuck to their story. Turns out that's all you need to keep a legend alive for a full century. But if you think a trunk-nosed mystery beast is strange, wait until you hear about the thing that washed up on a beach in Africa with a completely different body plan. The Gambo. Most ocean cryptids have Wikipedia pages, documentary appearances, and at least one guy on Reddit who won't shut up about them. The Gambo has barely any of that. It exists primarily because of a single event, a mysterious carcass that washed ashore on Bungalow Beach in the Gambia, West Africa, back in 1983. The descriptions are consistent enough to be unsettling: a long-necked, flippered creature, roughly 15 to 18 feet long, resembling something between a marine reptile and a plesiosaur. Local teenager Owen Burnham found the thing, took measurements, and made sketches before the carcass was cut up by locals for meat, which is, not ideal for scientific preservation. Here's the thing: the Gambo never got a proper examination. Everything we have comes from Burnham's eyewitness account, his sketches, and cryptozoologist Carl Schucker's later investigation. For a creature that could represent a surviving prehistoric marine reptile, the physical evidence is frustratingly gone, chopped up and eaten before anyone with a lab coat could get near it. The debate is whether the Gambo was just a decomposed dolphin filtered through excited misidentification or an authentic unknown species. And honestly, if this exact same carcass washed up on a British coastline instead of a Gambian one, it would be in every cryptid documentary ever made. But it didn't, so nobody talks about it, which is a shame, because the next creature on this list has even less respect and an even weirder body. The Conrit. Most ocean cryptids sound like something a sailor made up after too much rum. The conrit sounds like something that actually existed. Found in Vietnamese and Cambodian folklore, the conrit reportedly inhabited the Mekong River and surrounding Southeast Asian waters. The name translates roughly to large snake, which for a creature described as over 100 feet long with scales and a pronounced snout feels like an understatement. Witnesses claimed it could generate whirlpools just by moving through the water. You know, casual stuff. Here's the thing. The conrit doesn't match the profile of a fantasy creature. It matches the profile of a mosasaur. Animals we have actual fossils of. Animals we know swam in these exact waters millions of years ago. The body shape, the size, the aquatic behavior, it all lines up with creatures that supposedly went extinct 66 million years ago. Cryptid enthusiasts call this the living fossil theory, and honestly, it's one of the harder ones to dismiss outright, but then the sightings just stopped. Reports peaked throughout the 20th century and dropped off a cliff after the 1980s. Skeptics say people were seeing river dolphins or saltwater crocodiles. Vietnamese scholars suggest the conrit is rooted in regional spiritual beliefs rather than biology. Both are reasonable, but there's a third possibility nobody likes to talk about. Maybe it was real, and maybe whatever was left of it simply died out before anyone with a camera got close enough. Sometimes the species just quietly disappears and takes the truth with it, which is depressing, but at least the conrit stayed in its river. The next cryptid decided the entire Pacific coastline was its personal highway. Cadborosaurus. Caddy is the most frustrating cryptid in the ocean. Over 300 documented sightings, newspaper coverage dating back to the 1930s, a photograph, and after 80 plus years of all that, we have exactly zero scientific confirmation. Nothing. Not a bone, not a scale, not a single piece of tissue, just a whole lot of people in British Columbia pointing at the water and going, there it is again. The creature reportedly stretches 45 to 60 feet long with a serpentine body, and this is the part that gets me. A horse-like head, a horse in the ocean, just galloping through the Pacific with its weird little horse face, like that's a normal thing for a sea creature to have. Sightings are concentrated around British Columbia and Northern California, with the most notable early encounter happening near Manaus in 1937. Multiple witnesses published in regional newspapers at the time. Then in 1968, someone actually photographed the thing, or at least photographed something. Marine biologists dispute the image, and honestly, disputed photograph might as well be the official motto of cryptozoology at this point. Cryptozoologists have proposed Caddy as a surviving zeuglodon, which is an ancient whale, or some kind of undiscovered pinniped. Skeptics say people are just looking at seals, floating logs, or weird wave patterns, and letting their imaginations do the rest. Which, fair. But 300 times? 300 separate people all saw the same log and said that's a horse snake? But if a creature with hundreds of sightings and photographic evidence can't get proven real, imagine what happens when something terrifying lives in a place nobody can even reach. Luska. Most ocean cryptids don't have an address. They're vague shapes in open water, blurry photos taken from boat decks, stories that happen somewhere out there. The Luska is different. The Luska has a lair. Off the coast of Andros Island in the Bahamas, there's a network of underwater sinkholes called blue holes. These are vertical cave systems that plunge hundreds of feet straight down into complete darkness. Even without a monster living in them, they're genuinely one of the most unsettling geological features on the planet. Divers who've explored them describe losing all sense of direction within seconds. The water turns black. Currents shift without warning. Some of these holes have never been fully mapped because nobody can get deep enough. And according to Caribbean folklore, something lives down there. The Luska is described as a hybrid between an octopus and a shark, roughly 75 to 100 feet long, with tentacles capable of dragging boats beneath the surface. Sightings intensified throughout the 1960s and 1980s, with fishermen attributing mysterious disappearances and unexplained shark attacks to the creature. Now, critics will point out that the Caribbean has centuries of well-documented piracy, violent storms, and natural hazards that explain vanishing boats just fine without invoking a tentacled shark monster. And they're probably right, but here's the thing. Those blue holes are real. They're deep. They're dark. And we genuinely don't know what's at the bottom of most of them, which is, not ideal. But if a creature with a fixed address unsettles you, wait until you hear about the one that just rises out of nowhere. Umibozu. Everything else on this list is a cryptid, something people claim to have seen, something that maybe exists, something hiding in the water waiting to be discovered. Umibozu is not that. Umibozu is closer to a god. For at least 300 years, Japanese sailors have told stories of a massive humanoid figure rising from the ocean surface. Not a tentacle, not a fin, a figure standing 30 to 40 feet tall, featureless, dark, rising out of calm water right before everything goes wrong. The name translates to sea priest or ocean monk, which somehow makes it worse. Here's the thing, most ocean monsters come from scattered eyewitness accounts and blurry photographs. Umibozu comes from an entire civilization's worth of documented maritime tradition. It was passed down through oral histories for centuries before being formally recorded during Japan's Edo period between 1603 and 1868. That makes it one of the most systematized ocean monsters in world folklore. This wasn't some fisherman's tall tale that got out of hand. This was woven into the cultural fabric of an entire seafaring nation, and the associations aren't fun. Umibozu doesn't just appear, it brings sudden storms, catastrophic waves, and ship disappearances. Sailors didn't tell Umibozu stories to entertain each other. They told them as warnings. Scholars have tried to rationalize it, distorted whale encounters, misidentified giant squid, purely symbolic representations of the ocean's danger. But none of those explanations account for the sheer consistency of the descriptions across hundreds of years and thousands of miles of coastline. Whatever Japanese sailors were seeing, they all saw the same thing, which is, not ideal. But if an ancient sea deity isn't unsettling enough for you, wait until you hear about what's crawling around under the Arctic ice. The Arctic sea spider. So, here's something fun. Giant sea spiders are real. They exist right now in Antarctic waters, crawling along the southern ocean floor on spindly legs with a span of up to 2 feet. They're called Colossendius megalonyx. They look exactly as horrible as you're imagining, and they are a documented, photographed, scientifically classified animal. Now imagine one scaled up to 120 feet. That's the idea behind the Arctic sea spider. This one lives purely in cryptid territory, described in scattered online accounts and deep sea folklore as an arachnid-like thing with leg spans estimated between 80 and 120 feet. So basically a spider the size of a building living under Arctic ice, which is, not ideal. Unlike most cryptids, this one doesn't have a long history of documented encounters. There are no named witnesses, no specific dates, no research teams filing incident reports. It's more of a concept that gained traction in online cryptid communities where people took the very real phenomenon of polar gigantism and asked, what if that went way further than it should have? The descriptions are consistent in the way internet folklore tends to be. Impossibly long, segmented legs, a small central body, and movement patterns that match known sea spider locomotion. Just bigger, nightmarishly bigger. Here's the thing, most ocean cryptids have zero biological basis. They're pure folklore. But the Arctic sea spider has a real animal sitting right there as proof of concept. We already know giant sea spiders exist. The only debate is whether they could get that large. Mainstream science says no, that arthropod biology physically cannot support that kind of scale. No verified photographs or specimens have ever been recovered, but if you think a giant spider under the ice is bad, wait until you hear about the prehistoric megashark that Mexican fishermen swear is still hunting in the Sea of Cortez, the black demon. Every other cryptid on this list requires you to believe in something completely unknown. No fossil record, no biological precedent, nothing. The black demon only asks you to believe that something we already know existed didn't fully die out, and that's a much smaller leap of faith, which makes it so much worse. Megalodon was real. That's not speculation, that's paleontology. A 60-foot prehistoric shark that dominated the oceans for roughly 20 million years before going extinct about 3.6 million years ago. Except fishermen in the Sea of Cortez have been saying for decades that maybe it didn't. Reports from Mexican fishermen intensified through the 1980s and into the 2000s, all describing the same thing, an enormous black shark far larger than any great white, lurking in the Gulf of California, estimated at 60 to 70 feet long, which lines up almost perfectly with megalodon proportions. These weren't tourists, these were people who spent their entire lives on that water and knew exactly how big a great white was supposed to be. Here's where it gets complicated. In 2013, 2013, Discovery Channel aired a mock documentary during Shark Week about Megalodon that was explicitly labeled fiction. Didn't matter. Millions of people walked away thinking scientists had confirmed a living Megalodon. The evidence pool for the black demon got absolutely flooded with people who couldn't tell a documentary from a movie, which is, not ideal when you're trying to evaluate actual fisherman testimony. Marine biologists uniformly reject the possibility. The fossil record has a 3.6 million year gap. The ecological conditions that supported a shark that size no longer exist, and zero DNA evidence has ever surfaced. But the fishermen keep telling the same story, and the ocean is very, very large. But if you think a giant shark is unsettling, wait until you hear about the pale humanoid figures Japanese researchers allegedly spotted rising out of Antarctic waters, the Ningen. Every other cryptid on this list has roots, folklore, fishermen's tales, centuries of oral tradition. The Ningen has none of that. Zero. It was born on anonymous Japanese image boards sometime around 2002, and within a few years, millions of people across the globe knew exactly what it was. That's not how cryptids are supposed to work. Here's what supposedly happened. Anonymous posts attributed to Japanese researchers in Antarctic waters described encounters with massive pale humanoid figures beneath the ice. We're talking 100 feet tall, smooth, featureless white skin, vaguely human limbs, just lurking under the surface of the coldest ocean on Earth, staring up at research vessels like something out of a nightmare you'd forget on purpose. The images that circulated were blurry, unverifiable, and absolutely terrifying, which is, the perfect recipe for the internet to lose its collective mind. But here's where it gets interesting. There are no specimens, no credible photographs, no scientific expeditions that have ever documented anything resembling a 100-foot pale humanoid in Antarctic waters. The Ningen doesn't even have a consistent origin story. Some communities describe them as biological organisms. Others insist they're extraterrestrial. A few corners of the internet have decided they're interdimensional because apparently regular ocean monsters aren't enough anymore. And yet millions of people genuinely know what a Ningen is. That's the real phenomenon here, not the creature itself, but the fact that the internet built an entire mythology from scratch. No ancient texts required, just anonymous posts and blurry photos, and somehow that was enough to create something that genuinely unsettles people on a primal level. The Ningen is what happens when humanity's oldest fear, the thing hiding in deep water, meets its newest tool for spreading stories. But if a creature invented on the internet can capture millions of imaginations, imagine what centuries of documented sailor testimony can do, because the Kraken has both the legend and the receipts. The Kraken. This is the one, the king of all ocean cryptids, the creature so legendary it has appeared in over 200 literary works, terrorized sailors across every European nation, and dominated maritime folklore for more than 300 years. And the wildest part? It turned out to be real. The Kraken first shows up in Scandinavian tradition as far back as the 16th century. A massive cephalopod, tentacles stretching 200 feet or more, capable of dragging entire ships beneath the waves. By the 1700s, it wasn't just campfire talk. Bishop Eric Pontoppidan was writing about it in natural philosophy texts, documenting sailor accounts with the same seriousness you'd give to cataloging a new species of bird. This wasn't dismissed as fantasy. Educated men treated it as zoology. And then in the 19th century, science caught up. Giant squid specimens started washing ashore. Real, documented, enormous cephalopods with eyes the size of dinner plates and tentacles lined with serrated suckers. The largest recorded specimen measured roughly 43 feet, which is genuinely massive for a real animal. But it's also about a quarter of what the legends described. Here's where it gets interesting. Giant squid aren't even the biggest cephalopod we know about. Colossal squid grow even larger with rotating hooks on their tentacles, which is, not ideal for anything swimming near them. And we've barely explored the deep ocean. We've mapped more of the moon's surface than the ocean floor. So the question isn't whether giant cephalopods exist. They do. The question is whether something bigger, something closer to those 200-foot legends, is sitting in a trench somewhere at a depth we haven't reached yet. 3 centuries of sailors said the same thing across dozens of cultures, and science found exactly what they described, just smaller for now. But if you think a giant squid is unsettling, wait until you hear the sound that shook the entire Pacific Ocean. The bloop. Every cryptid we've covered so far has one thing in common. They're all built on stories, eyewitness accounts, folklore, blurry photographs. Stories are compelling, but stories aren't data. The bloop is data. In 1997, NOAA's underwater microphone array picked up something nobody could explain. A massive, ultra-low frequency sound so powerful it was detected across multiple hydrophone stations separated by over 5,000 kilometers. That's like someone whispering in New York and a microphone in London picking it up clearly. Except this wasn't a whisper. This was one of the loudest underwater sounds ever recorded. The research team ran it against every known sound profile in their database. Whale vocalizations, geological events, submarine activity, underwater volcanoes, zero matches. The bloop's acoustic signature was consistent with literally nothing science had on file. This isn't some fisherman swearing he saw a shadow. This is a verified anomaly recorded by government-operated scientific instruments. The bloop is real. That part isn't up for debate. What made the sound is very much up for debate. Years later, NOAA proposed the bloop originated from an ice quake, a massive chunk of Antarctic ice fracturing and crashing into the ocean. Mainstream science accepted this and moved on. Case closed, everyone go home. But here's the thing, the cryptid community didn't go home, and their objections aren't entirely unreasonable. The acoustic profile doesn't perfectly match known ice quake signatures. The explanation was proposed years after the event with no way to replicate it, and NOAA themselves never issued a definitive statement confirming the ice theory as absolute fact. So 27 years later, we have a sound that was too loud to ignore, too strange to categorize, and too inconvenient to leave unexplained. Something in the deep ocean made a noise powerful enough to register across an entire ocean basin, and we put a question mark next to it and moved on, which is, not ideal. We've mapped roughly 25% of the ocean floor in detail. The other 75% is more poorly understood than the surface of Mars. Every cryptid on this list might be nonsense, or the ocean is just really, really big, and we are really, really small. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.